Thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. That's the title of our talk today. It's going to be a rather short talk, so just going to be a primer on these two things. As you've already been told, my name is Laurynas, and I am the co-founder, deputy CEO, and the principal information security consultant at Cognit Consult. My all other accolades and 4 letters after the name are on the screen for those who are interested. We are the first, and as far as I know, the only local QSA company in the Baltic states. Our primary focus is on PCI DSS assessments, PAID-SS validations, and PCI DSS penetration tests. So these are the core 3 services, core pillars that our business is built on and around. I was told that 2 particular topics would be interested for this audience, that is cloud and encryption with and without an HSM. So let's jump into it. And cloud and PCI DSS. People who've been working with payments and clouds probably by now have heard the saying that there is no cloud, it's just someone else's computer. And in a sense, it is true. It's not to say that the cloud is exactly the same as deploying everything on your own hardware. Cloud does have its benefits, but in the essence, it is someone else's hardware with layers and layers of software on top of it. And someone else is going to be managing the hardware, and you will be dependent on them to help you comply with your PCI DSS requirements. So, does PCI DSS allow cloud? Well, yes. And everyone's probably feeling that but is coming. And there is a but. It's not that straightforward. Cloud is not a fix for everything. So what are your options if you want to use a cloud? The big 3 ones is not going to be a surprise to anyone. It's Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, and Google Cloud. These 3 service providers got PCI DSS validated services that you can use. And you always have an option of using a cloud services that are not PCI DSS certified. When I'm saying they're not PCI DSS certified, it's not technically true. In all cases, you might find a lesser known PCI DSS service cloud service providers that do list PCI DSS compliance on their websites. However, at this point, we come to our first practical tip. Before you sign up for any cloud services, do check their AOC document. The AOC stands for Attestation of Compliance, or more colloquially called the certificate. You might find a cloud service provider listing PCI DSS compliance, but if you check their AOC document, you're most likely to find that their compliance is limited to the physical infrastructure. So that's basically a physical access control and their physical data center. So that's basically one of the 12 requirements of the PCI DSS standard. Same applies to the big 3 service providers, the Amazon, Google, and Azure. They do have a lot of services in their portfolios, and not all of them are PCI DSS validated. So before you deploy into the cloud, make sure you understand what services you're going to use. Check the AOC document to make sure that services you need for your application or a specific infrastructure are certified. Even with the certified services, it's not done yet. You might have a service that is listed as certified, but your cloud service provider is not going to cover all of the specific bits of the requirement. So do check a responsibility matrix. The big 3 service providers do have those documents. Most of them make them available publicly. As far as I know, Amazon, you have to request this document specifically from them. But this will help you with your understanding with your compliance. For example, you might have a AOC document listing that the service provider, say Amazon, have got implemented information security awareness program. However, this program is going to be implemented in their particular validation scope. That does not mean that you don't have to have your own information security awareness program, because you do. And this responsibility matrix will help you to understand what parts of the requirements will be covered by the service provider and which parts of the requirements you do have to comply with yourself. The big three, the Amazon, the Microsoft, and Google, they have spent a lot of time and effort and money having their services validated. That makes your, as the end user or developer or service provider, life a lot easier because they will cover a lot of the PCI DSS requirements in their scope. If you do choose to use a cloud service provider without a PCI DSS compliance, situation is going to be a lot different. If a service provider does not have their own AOC document, and us as an assessor still have to validate compliance with all of the PCI DSS requirements. And without a document for us to trust that the service provider will comply with the requirements, we have to drag all of their infrastructure in your assessment scope. And that is extremely expensive. That's going to be a very long and difficult process and a very tedious one. So in my personal opinion, you're much better off deploying your systems on your own hardware compared to using a non-PCI DSS compliant cloud service provider. To cement the points raised above, unfortunately my memory isn't that good, I will have to read a few sentences. These are quotes from a council's informational supplement on cloud computing. If you want to read these documents, about 80 pages long, it's a bit dry, but it's available publicly free of charge. Just make sure you download the version 3 of the document because it's already been revised twice. So, customers should consider that while they can outsource the day-to-day operational management of the data environment, they retain responsibility for the data they put in the cloud. And customers have the final responsibility for security of their cardholder data environment. So again, just because you're using a certified service provider, it does not mean that you offload all of the responsibility to them. The customer should confirm that the services used by the customer were included in the provider's PCI DSS compliance validation. Moreover, the customer must still ensure that it is using the service in a compliant manner and is also ultimately responsible for the security of its SAGD. SAGD being the cardholder data environment, so the systems, applications, databases where your card numbers are stored. So again, responsibility matrix will help you with that, to check what elements of the requirements you have to comply with yourself and which parts of the requirements will be covered by the service provider. Customers may wish to test within its own environment and whatever else it can access, such as the boundaries between itself and other customers or between itself and the provider systems. However, if such testing is not permitted by the provider, the customer will have to rely on the providers to perform and validate these requirements. Again, it is someone else's hardware, it is someone else's systems. If they do not allow you to do something yourself, you will have to rely on them. If they refuse something to do that the compliance requires, you can't be compliant. Security monitoring solutions for virtual networks are still evolving and are not as mature as those available for physical networks. For instance, continuous segmentation testing between the cloud tenants' networks. Again, cloud solutions are often proprietary. They don't have some standards that you can apply across different service providers. Okay, let's change gear. Encryption. For those, just quick raise of hands, how many of you have to deal with PCI DSS in your daily lives? Oh, quite a few. Right, so you already know that if you want to store card data or card numbers in a recoverable way, so basically if you want to retrieve the full card number, there is no other option. You have to encrypt this data. There is no exclusions in the standard for that. Standard does not provide a specific one method for data encryption. So what are your other options? The options is using a physical HSM in your physical environment. If you have your own network, if you have your own service, you buy a physical appliance, you deploy it, and standard requires for you to have what is called a crypto architecture, basically maintaining the list of the encryption devices you have, the keys you have, your key rotation procedures. The rest of the stuff, the key management, the encryption is being handled by the HSM device. At the end of the day, that's what it's designed for. Second option is using an HSM in the cloud. as long as it is a PCI DSS validated service. A mixed solution where you have your applications running in the cloud, but your HSM is physically in your network performing all the key operations and your encryption. And finally, some sort of proprietary solution that you can come up with yourself. A bit more details of all these possible options. So physical, it's probably straightforward. It's just a box you deploy in a network. You follow the manufacturer's instructions. Once you've got set it up and running, it does everything for you. You don't have to care much about it. Compliance service in the cloud. Again, it's going to be somewhat similar to the physical box, except you will have access to some sort of API or some sort of abstraction layer on top of it. You will not have access to the physical device. Some of the service providers do allow you to purchase a dedicated HSM. It's going to be a bit closer to a physical machine. Again, you will not have the actual physical access. However, you'll have a bit more management options for a dedicated HSM machine in the cloud. A common complaint from the customers that we hear is that HSM appliances are very expensive, and indeed they are. And the third option, where your infrastructure is in the cloud but the HSM is deployed locally, is somewhat unofficially endorsed by the council. However, this does not help you with the cost, because you still have to have a physical HSM device, and it increases the complexity because your applications are running in the cloud and you have a physical machine on your physical network. So it's unsurprisingly that we don't see these in the wild very often, if at all. So the last option, can we live without an HSM appliance? Again, standard does allow this option. However, it comes with two requirements or two limitations. On top of requirement to use a strong encryption. Again, Council has been relying on NIST documentation for strong encryption for many years. They used to list accepted encryption algorithms in the standard itself, but not with the latest version. You are now referred to the NIST documentation. For those who are interested, there's going to be a NIST special publication on 800-57 and 800-52 dealing with encryption key management and encryption implementation in TLS protocol. So again, NIST documents, if not all of them, most of them are available free of charge and available publicly. So whoever wants to can go into NIST library and download these documents. Okay, let's get back to the two major requirements for encryption without an HSM. Dual control and split knowledge. Seems to be simple on the surface, but the devil is in the detail. If you take split knowledge, it does not mean that you can generate and use some tool on your console, generate an RSA key, split it in half, and be done with it. It's explicitly prohibited by the standard. Split knowledge means that people maintaining shares of a secret, or say your key is a secret, must not be able to determine anything about the other shares or the secret itself. So you must have to implement some sort of key XORing or Shamir's secret sharing or some other solution in such a way that no living person ever gets to see your encryption key. In practice, it's very difficult to do if you have a system administrator with godlike privileges running around your servers. You might try loading the keys directly into your volatile memory, but again, for every system reboot, you will need to gather all of your key custodians to reload the keys into the system for it to function after reboot. And system availability comes into consideration at this point. Your systems might need to run 24/7 without any downtime. If you need to hunt down your 5 key custodians in the middle of the night, it's not going to happen quickly. Dual control. Again, the big idea with dual control is that you must design your system in such a way that no single person is physically able to do anything with your keys. They cannot rotate them, they cannot change them, they cannot extract them. Basically, implementing dual control and split knowledge, probably the best way to define it is trying to build an analog HSM device, but instead of using wires and transistors and some code, you are using people, you're using some sort of strong boxes or safes, or you're printing something on paper and sticking them in a sealed envelopes and tying it all together with some sort of policies and procedures. So summary of this is, even though standard does allow you encrypting the data without an HSM, these two specific limitations are quite difficult to implement in practice. It might not even be possible to implement in your particular case. You might not have enough staff to split the keys. You might not have enough knowledge to build in key shares. Your system availability might not allow you for calling the key custodians to reload the keys. Well, thank you. Thank you for your time, and thank you for your attention. And I believe we still have some time for questions.
Yes, so thank you for presentation. We have a couple of questions. So first of all, clarification. So on your slides, when you say, is it possible to do it without HSM, you don't mean hardware HSM, you mean any kind of HSM?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's, you can use a software, as I mentioned, if you have a certified cloud, they would have a certified HSM service that basically you would offload all your encryption key management to them, to the service provider, similar to as a hardware HSM, but yes.
Mm-hmm. So one question with a couple of votes. I think I know the answer already, but what PCI DSS compliant cloud HSM services do you recommend?
We have seen in practice the Amazon one and Asia one. We haven't had in our practices the Google services yet, but for Amazon and for Asia, we do know that they have a PCI DSS validated HSM services. So again, before you deploy your infrastructure in the cloud, check their AOC documents. If they list HSM service in their AOC document as validated service, you can use it.
Mm-hmm. So here's a question with a couple of upvotes. Is there any compliant possibility to use HashiCorp Vault as HSM?
Well, HashiCorp Vault is not certified as an HSM device, so it falls into the manual key management thing. You will have to build a manual procedure around it, because the HashiCorp Vault itself, it does not limit you from outputting actual keys into console, into files, and et cetera, et cetera. So you will have to build some sort of manual key management procedure around it.